Hey, we're live.
Hi, we're live. All right. Hi, everybody.
Hi,
We are
everybody.
here live. We are re-drinking. Re-drinking is a little bit. I'm Valerie Stivers, and this is my pal Hank
Hank
Zona.
Zone.
Waiting for him to say his name. So we're re-drinking, which is a video series where we bring you a beverage, a wine or a spirit. Today, a beer that has an interesting cultural history. So today, what we are doing is drinking sorghum beer from a
Yeah,
brewery in Montclair, New Jersey. Here's the sorghum beer,
yeah,
and
right there.
we are discussing the work of a woman named Scholastique Mukasonga, which is called The Barefoot Woman. So again,
Yeah.
we're
So before we
oh,
talk about the beer, tell us all about the book and its significance, please.
right, right. So what we're doing when we're re-drinking is we're finding a new and interesting and hip beverage, and we are exploring it through some of its cultural roots and its cultural history. And today, I found a great book called The Barefoot Woman, which is written by a Rwandan author. Her name is Scholastique Mukasonga, and it mentioned the sorghum beer. But I'll first tell you a little bit about her,
Mhm.
which is that she's a Rwandan. She was born in 1956 and is a Tutsi. And in the late 50s in Rwanda, I mean, this is a sad story. We're going to end up being celebrating her mother, but this is a country with a troubled history. And in the late 50s was when the pogroms against Tutsis started, and her family was relocated from where they lived, which was a place called Nyamata, to a place they called the Bugesera, which was, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but it was a place of exile. And it says that even though they could make a living there, it did little to soften the crushing sorrow of their exile. So she ended up taking a very narrow path that Tutsis could take at that time to getting an education. She went to school in Kigali, and she ended up becoming a social worker and having to leave the country in the 70s because her life was in danger. And she ended up in Paris, but her whole family was killed in the genocide in 1994. So it was 37 members of her family were killed. And 10 years afterwards, I know we were all alive then, watching it happen from afar, which is a terrible thing. And she went back to Rwanda 10 years later, and it inspired her to write about her life and her family. So she wrote The Barefoot Woman, which is a tribute to her mother. Um, and is really just a wonderful book. She's written several other books. She wrote a memoir. She's now written some fiction. I'm hoping to read and order them all, but this one especially, she was trying to evoke the life that was lost and the style of living that was lost. So she wanted to write about her mother's life in the most granular way possible, and talking about what a real woman and real African woman, Rwandan woman's life was like at that time. So the book starts often in the middle of one of those never-ending chores that fills a woman's day. And then in parentheses, she specifies the chores, and she says sweeping the yard, shelling and sorting beans, weeding the sorghum patch, tilling the soil, digging sweet potatoes, peeling and cooking bananas. And I just love this because here I am, a woman who has spent the day doing chores. There's a woman who has spent the day doing chores while remote schooling children. So I have taken this dress off 3 times and then put it back on for a meeting and then taken it off and put on work clothes to do housework. And here we are. So everybody understands, I think, in this day and age, how this woman felt with her never ending round of chores. Her life story ends up being very beautiful, told here in The Barefoot Woman. And sorghum and sorghum beer, because it is really a very specific and rural description of this village life, plays a huge part in it. So, in celebration of her mother and the spirit that led Scholastique Mukasonga to write this great book, we are drinking this beer.
Yeah.
Here,
So, which is interesting because one of the things you liked about the book, you said it was beautifully written and it's a beautiful story and tribute to the mother. But you said there's really food and drink really throughout it, and based on the nature of the time period in the family, it was what they were producing. And interesting enough, in my research, uh, the beer was produced in African culture usually by women. Women were the brewmasters in their homes, and it was an important beverage even going back to to ancient times. And sorghum actually happens to be an incredibly vital grain throughout all of Africa. It's one of the reasons for its popularity is because it's able to be grown there. It's very much heat resistant. It is used. The grains are used in eating. It's used for feed for livestock, and of course, it's used to actually, just like grains are used here, it's used to make beer. And and since it's the one that grows there.
We have a comment. Nancy Schwartz says, "Hi, you
Yeah,
guys are back again."
we are back. And thanks for being back, Nancy, for taking a work break and checking in. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said to me at one point, "Hey, I really want to talk about this book. Can you find sorghum beer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I said, "There's a microbrewery about 20 minutes from where I live. It's in Montclair, New Jersey, and I was pretty certain that they produce the sorghum beer." And I went and gotten in touch with them, and it's the Montclair Brewery, I should say, and it's owned by Leo Sawadogo and his wife Denise Ford Sawadogo. Leo is from Burkina Faso, which is on the western side of Africa, as opposed to Rwanda, which is on the eastern side. His wife Denise happens to be first generation first person in her family born of a family from Jamaica, Jamaican immigrants. So they work a lot of African and West Indian Caribbean flavors into their beers, and it's pretty cool and pretty fascinating what they do there. So when I spoke with Denise by phone, and then I went up and met with Leo last week, really exciting because Leo was a home brewer for about 13 years before he opened up the microbrewery, and he imports a lot of the product that they use in these beers, including the sorghum. We also have a beer we'll talk about in a while that uses baobab fruit, and they also use hibiscus, which is very popular both in West Indian culture, Caribbean culture, as well as in African culture. So you are holding up your motherland, and it's called the Motherland sorghum.
Yes,
And
and you know what? It's delicious. It's actually is it only made from sorghum, this beer, or does it have other?
He's using Cascade hops, I believe, in that. But the nice thing about sorghum is also gluten free. There are sorghum beers that have been on the market here in the U.S. Because people are looking for more gluten free alternatives, but they tend not to really have a lot of taste. So this is has much more taste. You can see too, it's
And it's
cloudy,
a cool color.
and
It's
it's
a
made
very
in a
cool
great
texture.
color.
Yeah.
In a cloudy style. The type of sorghum that's used to make beer tends to be the colored sorghum, which is red or brown sorghum, not the white sorghum. And they're made in a sour style. I think you told me recently you stopped at a pub and had a sour ale and you really liked it.
I
I
did.
think that's why you probably like it too, because this is a sour, if you will,
Right.
beer too. So
I do kind of love it, I have to say. I printed out a picture of sorghum. Here's sorghum. It's a grass because I had never seen it. So sorghum is grass, and it has this little, grainy thing on it. That yes, she actually says in the book. I mean, the book gives an incredible amount of detail about preparation of food and how they made things. And she says that white sorghum was for making like a porridge or a paste, and the red sorghum was for making beer. And what you said in general is totally true of what she said in this book, that sorghum, she says we valued all of our food, and we had, beans and potatoes and a lot of things that actually came from America, but sorghum was native to Africa, and sorghum was the most important crop that they had, and a crop that had an enormous amount of ritual associated. She describes how her mother would take a dried gold-tinged sorghum stem and make something called an urigori, which was a diadem that held up the hairdo, a tall hairdo worn by a Rwandan woman. And this was a symbol of fertility and a source of blessings, and you would leave it hanging in your house when you left, and for good luck and protection of your house, which, considering what her mother was working against with sort of constant soldiers and raids and persecution, they needed the blessing, and used the sorghum for that, as well as, many. Also the New Year, the old Rwandan New Year, before they had, our New Year. They had the beginning of the sorghum harvest was the New Year. So this was like, the rhythms of life were completely tied to sorghum.
yeah, no, it's really interesting. And the other thing is, it's sorghum is grown throughout Africa, and there's different styles and different names of sorghum beers that are made throughout the whole continent.
Mhm.
And I thought it was interesting and sort of nice sort of tie-in here, in that the Rwandan style and the Burkina Faso style are very similar, except you mentioned in that first paragraph bananas, and in some of the sorghum beers that they make in Rwanda, they're also using banana in those beers as well too. So again, depending on where you're on the country, kind of like here, different parts of our country will use different ingredients for different foods and different drinks, and same in Africa, which obviously is a huge, fascinating continent, and
Many
so I
traditions.
thought that was pretty cool.
So, did they tell you at the brewery how they made their sorghum beer?
He was actually making his latest batch, his motherland sorghum, these past couple of days. I didn't have a chance to go up there. He said he'd actually send me some pictures of it. He also is a distiller and hoping to open a distillery someday. Also, again, using a lot of traditional African and West Indian and Caribbean ingredients in those products. So it should be pretty interesting. I'm actually looking forward to that. I think it'll be pretty cool. So let's try. Should we try the next beer, which actually brings us into another African ingredient that wasn't necessarily mentioned
Was not mentioned in this book.
in the book?
Yes.
So
This
so
is the
this
glass,
is
beautiful
this
beer.
is
I
a
have a hard time making things face the screen. There we go.
yeah. So this is an imperial stout, and it is made with baobab fruit. Baobab is the tree
Also
of life,
delicious.
and
Completely delicious.
this is also part of a very special project that happened this summer. Black is Beautiful was an undertaking started by, I think it was by Weathered Souls microbrewery in Texas, and it was to raise awareness and also to raise funds really for really for to support justice and equality for people of color. And over 900 microbreweries in the country have since
Right.
taken part in this Black is Beautiful
There we
initiative.
go. Black is beautiful. I wish we could have a screenshot of that because it's such a pretty. It's a really pretty can and is also
Yeah.
a delicious beer.
And what's interesting here, Montclair Brewery is actually owned by two people of color, which isn't necessarily common in the world of microbrewing.
But
And
well, I want to say, I had a good friend who grew up in Montclair, and I always thought it was very golf clubby. I didn't know it was.
it is now kind of Brooklyn West extension, similar to my community, Maplewood. So, but it is a diverse community now. It still has some fabulous homes and a great restaurant scene, and and it was fun to go up there and actually just check out the place last Friday and buy some of these beers and even some non-alcoholic beverages that they make too. Including ginger beer and root beers and also sorrel, and a great sorrel product that they make too. But this was a great initiative. I think over 900 microbreweries participated in it, and their take on it was to actually blend in some of the baobab fruit into this imperial stout.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one that I feel really enthusiastic about, and both the beers are delicious, and the book, which is Scholastique Mukasonga's The Barefoot Woman, is also, it's a small book. You can see it's from Archipelago Press, which is a really small press, and they both of these things would be a huge pleasure for anyone who wants to experience more about them. I want to tell you how the sorghum beer was made in the village because they told me and I learned about it. So, the
Cool.
So what they would do is first they would because they were refugees and they didn't have everything they needed, they had to, and this part was a little bit unclear to me how they did it, but they had some kind of thing where they had to use manure to make a threshing floor of some kind. So they would get the little grains and thresh them somehow. And then, which was kind of harrowing because if it rained at any point during this, the grains would get mixed with the manure and it wouldn't work. So they had like a whole system where they could instantly jump on it and remove it if it rained. So then they would take the grains and soak them for 3 or 4 days. Then they would spread out banana leaves and put the grains on the banana leaves and then burn other banana leaves to make a banana leaf ash. They mix the banana leaf ash with the sorghum grains, cover it with another layer of banana leaves, and leave it to sprout. Then it sprouts. It says that they sort of remove the sprouts. I'm not sure why, but they get rid of the sprouts, and the kids and the children and the people who are helping with this process are, blissfully eating the black, sticky, sweet sorghum grains, they said. And then you grind those and make a flour. And then basically all you had to do was put the flour in water. And wait, I have a little thing here. It says, so now you've done all these processes, you've made the flour, and it says, you put the flour in the trough, you pour boiling water over it, and you stir with a spatula the size of an oar. What you want is a clear, pale, sweet gruel. You divide that among the jugs, adding a little yeast, umusamburo, that you get from plants gathered in the bush. Don't bother asking, it's a secret. And you go to sleep listening to the beer bubble and sigh as it ferments in the big black jugs at the foot of the parents' bed. So
yeah, and that's it. They still to this day are using natural yeast from local plants and from the grain and all too. And it's pretty amazing. And it's you can see there's a ritual and ceremony behind making it, but it's also used in a lot of rituals and ceremonies too. It is the holiday beer that is made for weddings and holidays and baptisms and
you needed to get enough of it for all of these sort of rituals of family, and that's also this wonderful book. We are at 15 minutes, which we're saying is good. So Scholastique Mukasonga, The Barefoot Woman, and Sorghum Beer from the
Montclair Brewery in Montclair, New Jersey.
Yes.
Yay, Jersey.
Exactly. Right. Oh, bye. Great.
See you all next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.